Thanks, Danielle. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming. Uh, I guess now it really is time for show and tell. We had a few Zoom glitches earlier in the day, but we're ready now. So thank you for joining us. And I'd like to begin my presentation by starting with a slide presentation that's going to walk us through some of the information about how to create a digital genealogy scrapbook. Now, certainly all of you, or at least most of you, have begun your research. Perhaps many of you are pretty far into it and have a lot of things that you've gleaned from your family research already. My question is always, how willing will your family members or future generations be willing to read through things that might appear in a booklet that talks about all the findings that you have on your ancestors? I know for the sake of my own kids, bits and pieces of information they've been interested in. But really, when it comes to it, there's so much more that I want to share. And I think if we can put things in kind of an artistic format, we're much more likely to have our ancestors or our future generations learn more about our ancestors. So up on the top of my screen, you can see the traditional scrapbooks that have been passed through generations. But what I want to talk about today is more like the scrapbook that you see at the bottom of the page, which is one that I did for my paternal family line. It's digital, but it can be printed out so that you can share books, but you can also share it online, which obviously is convenient if your family is pretty dispersed. This is actually the family album. I started the cover by showing the various generations going from my great-grandparents in the far left and all the way down to my kids and grandkids. I'm going to step out of the slide presentation for a minute and actually show you an online video that goes through the whole album. So I mentioned that the first page goes through a description of what the album's all about so that the person who's going to be viewing this will actually know which line are we talking about and who are some of these people. And then I started with the very oldest generation that I had information with at the time. A lot of people ask me, what are you going to do if you don't have pictures of your ancestors? And we'll talk a little bit about this as we create the album. But you can see here that we used maps and stories and various information that I had gleaned during my research and some of the actual documents. This is one of my favorite pages because, as you can see, the documents that we find are really relatively interesting and in some cases pretty beautiful, especially if somebody had great handwriting. And so here is a page. It's a 2-page spread actually, and it gives a lot of information about the marriage, the census at the time in 1880, maps of where they lived, and photos of my great-grandparents. My great-grandfather was a Great Lakes sea captain, so I was able to get the picture on the right from my grandmother. That's him as the captain standing at the top of the ship. But then I did research online to find out more about the ships that he had been on during his lifetime. He was known for rescuing a burning ship at sea. And so you can see my background page that I used here was to kind of depict the whole scene of the burning ship, but also more information about his family and the outline of where his registration of death is there on the bottom right, and the members of his family listed next to his photo. This is the page we're going to be constructing together today so you can get a better feel for how to actually create a digital genealogy scrapbook of your own family. I have 2 books that I've written about this that are available on Amazon. So if you don't find what you need from the video today or from viewing it later, perhaps you can find some help there as well. But this is the 2-page spread that we're going to work on together today in our hands-on session, so you can see how easily it's done. And we went on to more information. You can see some of these pages. For instance, the one on the left was actually one that was made available through the internet. All I had to do was insert the picture, and below it put in a little bit of the census information. So sometimes half the work's been done for you. He owned a trucking company. My grandfather rather actually was the one to start the company, and so here's all the information about the next generation. After my great-grandparents, I start to talk about my grandfather and his family, and then move on to talking about stories, which I think are one of the most important parts of, because you can't get everything through the photos. You have to go on to talk about your memories of your family members that you're close to. And we moved to the next generation, which was my father. And obviously, the closer you get to yourself, the more information you're going to have. Here, I actually used part of the census document as the background paper, and then included photos and stories as well. More information about my siblings, and then about where we all lived, my father and his occupation. And as we get here, you'll see that there's a QR code that's listed on this page. The company celebrated 100 years in business, and my niece did a great job of creating a video that I wanted to share, and that was easily put into this document by using the QR code, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. I think you might find that helpful if you have done any interviews with your ancestors and you might like to include their own words or other things that you've videoed along the way in your lifetime that make the album much more personalized. I end with a little bit about myself, and then a dedication to those who I feel helped us become who we are. So back to my PowerPoint. Think about the equipment that you'll need. It's really not very much. Either a computer desktop or laptop. This is not something that you could do on a tablet. Much too much information for it to be able to handle the software. I think a scanner is helpful, although I have to say that in many cases nowadays you can take photos of your documents with your phone and then use them without having to necessarily scan them in. External storage, I find that's really important, not only because you don't want to lose your work if something should happen to your laptop or hard drive, but also because digital scrapbooks consume quite a bit of storage. And so it's nice to have an external way to save it. In some cases, it might be helpful for you to have your camera in order to take a photo of a document that you might need to have more clarity on that you couldn't get through a scanner. Memorabilia, things of that nature that you might want to include in your scrapbook, where you could take, say, a photo of somebody's military medal, and this way you can include it in your album without having to scan it. Same thing using your phone's camera. As far as the software is concerned, there's two important things. First of all, I use Adobe Photoshop Elements. You know, Adobe makes both Photoshop and Elements. Adobe Photoshop is pretty much very technical and much more for the professional, whereas Elements is pretty easy to use. I actually use Photoshop Elements 2021, but 2022 was just released. You can see over here on the right that You can try it for free for a 30-day trial. My recommendation to everyone would be to get everything ready, to be prepared with what you want your album to say and to be and who you want to include in it, and then start your trial so that you can make the most of the trial and see if this is the way you want to go. I can also say that a lot of people ask me, well, can't we just use Snapfish or Shutterfly? And I think you'll see as we go along that Photoshop Elements offers you a lot more. You saw in the preview that I gave you that we were able to incorporate documents in the background. We were able to put verbiage where we wanted to put it. You're somewhat restricted with the other commercial abilities to create albums. But if you find that this is more than what you'd care to invest your time in, then certainly, even with the limited function of some of the other commercial digital photo album producers, you would be able to do what you can. Thing is templates. When I first started doing this, people said to me, well, I'm not really very artistic. I wouldn't even know where to start on a blank page. I mean, I like the end outcome of how it all looks, but when I stare at a blank page, I wouldn't have the first clue as to what to put where and how to make it look as artistic. Well, I have a dear friend, Yin, who lives in Singapore, and she has developed her whole line of various templates, which is fabulous. You put the template in, you add your photos, you add your documents, and it's pretty much just inserted here, and there you go. Plus, she has a lot of her scrapbooks that she's done using the template, so you get an idea for how the photos will look once you use the template. And as you can see here, she's been kind enough to give you a discount of 30% on any of her templates, which aren't very expensive to begin with, but there's a lot of them. And that will last until March 31st. So don't procrastinate too long before you decide whether you want to get involved in this endeavor. And going to her area, in fact, let's take a little escape from here, and I'm going to go to her site. Here we have it, yindesignblogspot.com. And you can see that she has a couple of album sets, some 24 by 12 templates, and some 12 by 12 templates. Now the 24 by 12 are the ones that I use, and that's the one I'll be demonstrating today. The reason I like it is a 2-page spread. It gives you a nice big album where people can really read what the documents say. And, you can do it any kind of size you want, but the 12 by 24s have been my favorite. So let me just click on that. And you can see the number of different templates that she's got. Each one of these is a 2 set of 12 by 24. And in some cases, she's even got some that are already into an album format where there's a whole set of them where all you'd have to do is, this is a 2-page, this is a 2-page. So it's pretty much laid out for you, and you just put your photos and your documents into it. I have to tell you, it makes it so much simpler than starting from scratch and trying to figure out what you want to put on your page and so on and so forth. So I have purchased many of them from her. Most of her 2 sets of 2-page spreads are $5. So, and plus you'll have the discount, so that helps too. But you can reuse the templates over and over and over again. In fact, we'll show you how to do that once we get started on the booklet. But I would encourage you, if you're going to do this, to use the templates because it's going to make your life a lot easier. All right, so much for templates. Mention that on the internet, there are all kinds of various scrapbooking digital kits that you can order if you want to embellish your pages even more. Certainly not necessary. As I mentioned earlier, you can take a lot of pictures with your camera of different things that you might want to add onto your page. But these are things that I just wanted to make you aware of that are available to enhance your page. Let's talk a little bit about the documents that we'll be including. As I mentioned earlier, sometimes you don't have photos of your ancestors that you want to put into the album, but you can certainly look for things like perhaps letters, postcards, newspaper articles. I like to use some of the documents we found along the way, such as your census documents, maybe not the whole page, maybe just a section of it. Registration cards and various draft information from military service, passenger lists, maps. I've found maps to be very interesting. You know, a lot of the generations to come that will be looking at this will have no clue as to where some of these places were. And so I find maps to be very interesting. Church records, a lot of times I find that the handwriting is absolutely beautiful. And I've mentioned memorabilia earlier. So all of these items can be a part of the pages that you produce. Go through it step by step of what we're going to do to create the page. Oops. And then we'll get to the hands-on part. So these are the steps. It looks like there's a lot, but really not necessarily so. First of all, you obviously need to have an idea for your album or the page you're going to produce. So I'm thinking that, you know, either you follow a paternal line such as I did or a maternal line, or you start with yourself and go backwards, or you start with the furthest generation you know and come forward, or you might even focus just on one particular couple in your family, you know, perhaps all their children and their children's children. It's really totally up to you. So obviously you're going to need to get organized, first of all, so that you have the documents together that are going to be the ones you probably will use. You might include more than you think you'll use. Better to have too many than too few. And I recommend just putting a folder on your desktop and including in it everything that you think you might potentially use, say, for that particular page. And then selecting a template, opening up the Photoshop software, gathering all the photos, documents, and templates that will then go into the Adobe Photoshop. We'll talk about the importance of backing it up and saving. I made the big mistake once. It got pretty far into an album and I hadn't backed it up. And for some reason, somehow it was lost. So we start all over. Then we'll be adding journaling, perhaps some titles. You might even think if you're doing a pretty big album that you might want to start the first page with kind of a table of contents. You might wish to color code pages so that certain sections are of certain generations. A lot of flexibility here. You can always add embellishments. And then once it's all said and done, a few enhancements, maybe make a few alterations. The beauty of a digital scrapbook is that as you find out more information, you can always add an additional page, or you can alter the information that you might have found more about or more clarity on or whatever. On my first album, I actually had the name of one of the sisters wrong, so I was able to go back because it's digital and correct it. And you're going to save the project, and as I've done, you can print it out and put it into a family album, or you can print the whole book and distribute it to family members, or you can just share it digitally. The sharing with family and friends, I think, is the most important part, because why did you go through all this work if you don't ever go ahead and share it? So here's how I started out this first one. I get a composition book and I just kind of say, okay, here's what I think I'm going to put on page 1. Here's what I'm going to talk about. Kind of diagram it out as to, okay, here I want to put, about their occupation. Here is where I want to put about where they lived. Here's where I'm going to include some photos that I have that bring back memories. And here's where I'm going to write out some of the stories. So just kind of giving you an overall feel for how you want the total album to look. Then you need an idea for the page. And so, this is the one I mentioned we're going to work on. I knew when I wanted to work on this page that I'm going to have to look for a template that's got a slot for 3 or 4 pictures and a couple of documents, particularly in this case was the registration of birth and registration of marriage. So you pick your template based on what you think you want to include on that page, and then just gather all the things and put them on that desktop folder. You can get ideas from other people. I call it scrap lifting. There are a lot of things out there on the internet. If you just Google genealogy albums or scrapbook albums, the one in the lower left, it might be a sample of something to give you an idea if you want to have just one picture and tell a big story about the couple. The one in the upper right, let's say that you want to talk about various generations and you've got a couple of photos that are multiple people in your family, and then a little bit of verbiage to the right. And the bottom one is kind of a nice collage of just remembering a specific family. So these kind of are all ideas that once you have the idea in mind and you have collected your own photos and your own stories, you can search for the template that looks closest to it and then just kind of paste it together. So I mentioned about getting organized and creating that desktop folder. I usually name mine family album, like Schwerman album, WIP, which means work in progress. That means I can keep coming back to it, and everything I'm doing, I keep in that one folder. I move all the photos that I might possibly use into this. As I said earlier, perhaps better to have more than enough, too few. I also move all the documents that I think are of interest into this folder so that I'll be able to easily find them when it comes time to work on the page. And I place the template that I think I might use. Sometimes I put more than one template in because I might start working on one and that's not going to cut it. And so then I might move to a different template. And I add any possible other embellishments that say I might have taken a picture of with my camera or gotten off the internet from some of the kits, some different background papers, that sort of thing. So here's a sample. This was for this particular album that we're going to work on. This was my work in progress page, and in it you can see the very far left-hand side is actually what the templates look like when you purchase them off of the internet. And they are specifically PSD. I'm not sure what it stands for. I think Photoshop, something or other. But anyhow, that's what that'll look like. You can see I've got those 4 photos in here. I've got a few little embellishments. One says my story and another one is a little scrolly-esque kind of thing. I have the background paper to the far right, and I have the certificates in here. So everything's going to be ready to go. I might actually have more than what I want to use before I get started, but in this case, I put just the things we'll be working with. Then I select the template. As I mentioned before, I picked this one because it has this nice big area here. That's all. Everything black would be a photo that's going to go in there. The brown is going to be where we're going to put the documents. You can select from one of multiple templates. So never be afraid that you're going to have to just start from scratch and try to figure out what to put where. And I mentioned earlier that we're going to use Photoshop elements to do this project. So let me go through a few things about what you're going to see when you open up your Photoshop Elements software. Pretty similar to what you might expect in terms of the setup. On this upper corner here, we have the menu bar. We'll use that a little bit. Here where it says open, this is how we open our documents to bring them into our desktop where we'll work on them. Over here are a number of different tools. When we start out, we'll just be using this one right here, which helps us move documents around. We'll use this little eraser that's going to help us fine tune an edge. And we'll use this text document, which helps us to put the wording in. Down at the bottom, you can see it says photo bin. We use that a lot during this process. And you might actually use tool options as well. It's where you can set finite things like what do you want your text to look like, etc. We work in what's called the layers panel that you see over here on the right. And all the layers of your page will show up here where this yellow arrow points to this whole panel. You can think of it as almost like working on a scrapbook where you'd start out with a base sheet of paper, and then you put on top of it a photo, and you might put on top of that a letter. And so we keep building on the document, and that's what's in the layers panel. All of this will make a little bit more sense to you as we go along. Many of you might have already worked with a digital scrapbooking thing, but I think the templates are the one additional thing that I've found to be really helpful. You'll be impressed to know that when we start out with Photoshop, you're actually working in what they call the expert mode. So little did you know, you're already an expert. We will, as I mentioned before, go to where it says open, and that will put all of the items that we had in that folder down here, as you can see. And then we'll start to move them up into our page. And we're going to do a hands-on, so you'll see exactly how this works. Just want to give you a little preview ahead of time so you know what to expect. So if we go into open, it automatically pulls all of these items in to your photo bin, and then we'll go one at a time and put them into the template, which you see looks like this on here. Here's that page that shows you that in my desktop, I actually had a folder. I put all of the items in. Saving and backing up. I mentioned when you first open up Photoshop, it will actually say the name of the template. Here you can see it says 1 yin template 358d.psd, and that's this template. When we go up to file and save as, we change the name of that template to what the name of our page is going to be. That way you can always use that template again for another page and another album or whatever. Once you have the template, you can use it multiple times. But you want to save your document as what it really is while you're working on it, as opposed to continue to work on it in the template itself. And again, we'll go through this in the hands-on, so you'll see exactly how it progresses from there. Then we'll be adding the journaling. You can see we had a little journal block here, and we'd be using the type tool, and we'll type in a little part of our story. You can add titles. You saw that picture earlier where I actually put a title on this page so that people would know right off the bat that we're talking about 1880. Add background pages. I mentioned earlier that in some cases I actually use a census document for a background. I've seen people take pictures of corrugated cardboard or a linen napkin and then use those photos to actually create the background page and make it interesting. You just don't want a plain white background. Then you add a few embellishments. This was one I added to this page, which was called My Story. Bought that off of the internet. You can add embellishments that you either get in online kits or make your own. And then, as you can see, there are a whole ton of other things that you can do that are not necessary, but can make for some pretty attractive family albums. If your intent is really just to get your story across in a more of an artistic, interesting manner, then certainly you don't need to do much more than what you've seen on some of my pages. But you can get pretty in-depth with adding and incorporating all kinds of different digital methods if that's what you choose. I mentioned earlier how we'll add the audio or a video QR code so that you can incorporate that into your page. And then we'll talk about saving your work. You can see that the Photoshop page that you actually create, you want to save that so that in the future, if you want to make any changes to it, you will be able to do so. Then you'll also save it as a JPEG so that you'll be able to print out the page, show it as a slideshow. Sometimes your page might be one that you really enjoy and you want to just put that one page into a frame or put it into a whole album. And then the third way we're going to save is for the web, and we'll be showing you how to do that as well so that you could transmit your digital page via email, put it on a blog or a website, or include it in a Facebook. As I mentioned earlier, each one of these takes a lot of bits. But by saving it for the web, it makes it a lot easier to transmit it. So now let's do the demonstration. And I'm also going to, this is the page we're going to make, as I said, and I'm going to open it up first for questions that you might have now, and then we'll keep the chat open for questions that you have along the way. So, Danielle, I take it we have some questions?
We don't actually, not yet.
Okay.
People have a lot of questions once you start moving stuff around, but a couple of things that people have shared here are tools like Canva and Blurb that they've used in the past. I myself have noticed that what you shared allows you to be a little more flexible in terms of where you put things. Do you agree with that, or do you know those tools as well?
Yes, Canva, I just recently learned about. I made the mistake early on of using a QR code generator that required a subscription, and I made that scrapbook in 2016. And unless you want to keep paying for a subscription, your QR code might, cost you a lot more than what you care to have. They're generated in some cases much more for a commercial company that, needs to use a QR code to promote their products daily. So Canva, I have come to learn, is a really good QR generator, simple to use, and it would be my recommendation. So, all right, without further ado, let's go on to actually creating the digital scrapbook. So I'm going to open up my Photoshop elements. And here's what you'll see on the first page. They give you some ideas of things to make and do and use with Photoshop, but we're going to go right in here where it says Photo Editor. And as you saw earlier in my slides, this is exactly what you see: the toolbar, the menu bar, the photo bin, and layers panel. So the first thing we're going to do is go up here to File, set new. I want a blank file that's going to be 24 inches wide to match my template and 12 inches high. And that just gives me a new starting page, which you now see is already down here in the bin. The next thing we'll do is open up that file folder that's on the desk. Well, mine popped right to it, but you can see I had it desktop and then my work in progress file. And in here, I think the first thing we'll do is put our template in to our desktop. So we click on that and then click on open. And again, what happens is the photo bin shows you that the template's now there along with the background. And it shows up here as being the yin template document. And it also shows up over here. Can you see this right-hand side of the?
Yeah, we can.
For me, it's everybody's photo. Hello, everybody.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay.
You can also, Barb, you can also move the photos up if you would like to get it out of your way so that you can work on that side. So if you drag the little panel up, it'll go to the top.
I see.
Then you have more access there.
So actually that didn't. There we go. All right. So over here, we're going to change the name on this page we're working on. And so I'd go up here to File, to Save As. And I'm going to save this instead of as the yin document, I'm going to save it as roots. So now their template is still there for us to use in the future, but this page in particular is going to be our roots tech page. We're going to go back into open and we're going to pull out those photos that we want to start with first. If I hold on Control, I can select just the photos. Wait, I get those four and open it up. And you'll see that when they come in, they all stack right up on top of one another. They all show up here in the photo bin. But I want to get back to seeing just this template. So I'm going to click on the template down here in the photo bin. And then I see that I have my template back on the top of the desktop, but I can still see all the photos. And for the first photo, if you look over here on the right-hand side in our layers panel, this one already is highlighted in blue, and that's what we want. If we click on it, it highlights it blue, and that's the photo we're going to work with first. So we're just going to click on our picture of my grandmother down here in the photo bin, and I'm going to slide it up here. And it immediately comes in here to our desktop template. Over here on the left, you can see that the arrow movement tool, transition tool is already highlighted. So I can click on her photo and position it where I want. And with Control and T on a PC, I believe it's Command T on a Mac, you can see that it highlights the corners of the document so that I can actually move this to make it a little bit wider if I want. And I can also transition it over here a little bit so that if I really wanted to have some background page showing, I can. And we click on the green arrow to say commit. If we don't like it, we click on the red circle and start all over. So then we'll take the next photo, which is going to be this one of the couple. It's the vertical photo. So we'll highlight that vertical black square and move them up into that one. Again, with this transition tool, we can slide them to where we want them to be. You see it's much bigger than the frame that is on there. And so there's two things we can do, either way works, to clip it into the photo area with the mat. One is to go up here to where it says layer on the menu bar and scroll down to where it says create clipping mask. If I click on that, you can see what happened. It just moved my photo right into the little square. I'll show you the other way when we get to the next photo. So our next photo is going to be this one of my grandmother in the rowboat. In order to position that one, we're going to put it over here in the corner where it's not in a frame. And we'll just drag it up over here. Sometimes they come into the center, so you can just grab them and position them. Now you see she's, this came in so that she's behind here, and I'd rather have a little bit of this over here. So if I go to the layers panel over here on the right and select hers, I can move it up so that she's going to be actually above this picture that was Ruth. And now you can see that she's actually on top of that photo. It's just like you placed her above her. So, sense. The next one we're going to put in is this photo up here, which is, if I want to see which one it is, I can actually click on this little eye and it will eliminate it. So, yep, that's the one we want. So we're going to click here in the layers panel, and we're going to drag this one up into that spot. Again, we're going to slide it over. It's a little bigger, but I don't really care about the man in the back. Again, if I hit Control T, I can actually move this so that it'll be a little bit smaller. I kind of like that. Hit it. Here's the other way that you can get it to create a clipping mask so it goes within the frame. On a PC, you click Alt, you hover in between till you see that little black box, and then click, and that puts it in there. We kind of cut off the top of her head. So again, we're going to go over here and just slide it down a wee bit. So now we have all of our photos entered. If we want it less cluttered down here in the photo bin, we can now eliminate these. So we click on it, you can right click and close it. You still have your photos. It's just that they're not going to appear on your desktop, so that things are a little less cluttered. And this is probably more important if it's really a very busy page where you've got a lot of things. The next thing we're going to do is bring in some of those documents. So again, you can go to open. I should mention you can also go up here to file and open, but this is so convenient. I just go right here. And we're going to bring in the certificate and the marriage certificate. Just clicking on both. I'm holding Control, so I only get those two. Open up, go to my template, and here we're going to bring in the birth certificate first. So let's just drag it up there. It comes in over here, so we'll slide it over. Control T so I can see those edges, and I'm going to make it really big by just sliding it over. So now you can see some of the information. You can actually read the document. It becomes somewhat like a background page, but yet more so it gives you the information that you were able to find. This box right here might be covering up some of the things that I might like to see. And so it's somewhat easy to just go over here where you see these horizontal document and you click on the little lock to connect these. So I have to commit this one. And then so that we get everything. Do it. Let's see. And then I can move it. Oh no, I'm still on. I got to mention one really great tool that's on here, and that one is down here in the toolbar, or in the by the photo bin, which says undo. So if you don't like something you've done, you can always use the undo button. So what I really want to do is this. And I'll be able to move this whole, oops. This is why, because I have that block down here too. Now let's try and do it. Oops. Sorry, folks. It's the beauty of live hands-on. Anyhow, you can lock 3 items together to move them as one unit and then reposition anything on the template to where you want it. Let's move on and go to putting our background page in. And that I've chose this paper right here. So open that up. And the template, I want that background page to be way at the bottom because it is background. So here's part of my problem with my birth certificate, was too far down on the page. So while I'm at it, I'm just going to move that up. And now where this background is, slide this paper up there. And it comes in above Ruth, so I gotta put it down below her. And then you can see we've got the background, and using that slide tool, we can move it over so that we've got it over here. I can also do the Control T while I'm on it. I can cover up this spot right here with some background paper. And click the red check or green check mark to commit it. Only 2 things or 3 things left to do. One is we want that other document to come in up over here. I'm going to try this again where I can take and put where I'm going to put the paper certificate in the middle there. So I want this, and it's going to include the outline and the white base. And I'm going to try to make this with Control T a little bit better. Now, because all 3 are selected, I can make it bigger with making all of them big. If I don't have all of them linked, then it would only move the frame or the white or the brown, as you saw earlier. With that a little bit bigger, let's move this marriage document from the photo bin up here. Over. Again, we're going to use Control T so that we can shrink it. And we're going to go up to File, or Layer rather, in our menu, and go to the clipping mask so we can get that to go into the frame. First, I have to do the red or the green check mark. I always forget that. Then up to Layer, Create Clipping Mask. There you have it. You know, this might be all that you really care to have on the page, but there's a few other things that I think are extremely important. One is our journaling, so that people know what this page is all about. So we're going to open up this little mat for the back of our paper. We'll go back here to our template down in the photo bin, and we will slide that up. Oh, before we slide it up, select where we want it to go. I do that right here. And then slide it up in there. It's the wrong direction. So again, if I hit Control T, you'll see that if I hover near the end, there's a little, that's kind of hard to see, a little arrow that allows. This can be real helpful when you have photos that you want to position differently. I didn't do a very good job with that, but. It's horizontal. So click it into our area. This time I'll use the little hover with Alt. I have it above where it says outline. I need to have it above the photo. There we go. Just wasn't pressing hard enough, I guess. Now we want to put some verbiage in here. And so we'll go over here to our toolbar, click the text tool. I find that it's easiest if you just create a big text block by just sliding it. So again, click the text tool, big box that you can put in there. Sometimes you can just text it, write out your text ahead of time and fill it from Word, but it's just as easy to go in here and start to type like this is the story. Pretty hard to see that. So if I click the green check mark, I can go way up here in the tools to this magnifying glass. And when I click on it, I can bring it bigger so that you can see it. See, I spelled grandfather wrong, so I go back to the text and just click there. The spelling. That's how that works. And so I'm going to make the text back to what it would look like on a screen. That might be it as far as you're concerned, but then again, there's a few little embellishments we had. So let me show you about those. We're going to add this one that says story and this little scrolly one. Again, we have to come back to the photo bin. You see, I did that by clicking down in the lower left-hand corner to bring it in. Click on the template again, and then way up here, Control T to make it small. Oh. Control T to make it smaller. And show you where I'm going to put it, because that's my problem right now, is it's coming in where I don't want it. So anywhere on the layers panel, we can click and bring it in to wherever we want. And I want to put it like over here by. And you see, sometimes they come in the middle. So over here, you just use that pointer tool again to transition it to put it wherever you want.
And Barb, all of these little elements that you're using, you got them through those little libraries that you showed earlier, right?
These I got through some digital scrapbooking sites that basically show sell kits where you can purchase all kinds of different embellishments. There's a lot to be had out there. Just for these items, these little ones that kind of make it a little bit, you know, more personalized.
Right. Awesome.
And then the last thing I want to show you is on this element that we are opening up. I wanted to soften this corner over here a little bit. So if I put this one up here, it comes in pretty stark, too dark of a black. It's kind of overshadowing everything else. So there's a little way up here in the right hand corner where it says opacity 100%. Well, I'm on that particular element. I can move that opacity slide over so that it brings it like muted. And another thing you can do to soften edges is you see on this picture of her, this stark line right here that we might not like. That's when I mentioned we'd use the eraser tool and we could just kind of, you know, take away some of that line if we want, maybe take it away over here. You have to be sure there's a paper underneath it, otherwise it's just going to go to the black of the template, but it kind of just makes her stand out a little bit less. And that's pretty much that. The last thing I want to show you is to take it over here and to do, first of all, your saving. We actually should have been saving all along, but it's going to save it as that Roots Tech page, the PSD. The reason you want to save that is because that saves this whole layers panel so that if you want to change anything in the future, you'll have the layers panel where you can change it. The next thing you want to do is save it as a JPEG. So we go down here where it says save as, and here, instead of having it say Photoshop, we're going to select JPEG and save it as a JPEG. I always save it to 12 because that's the maximum number here, and it gives you the best and then the third way we're going to save it, again, going over to File, Save As, Save for the Web. I mentioned that these pages have quite a bit of pixels, 7,200 pixels. So we're going to change that top width one, and since it's way too high, we're going to put it more like, I put it anywhere from 600 to 1,000 pixels. And then hit save. And it makes them, and again, down here, I do Roots page dash web. So I know that this is the one I've saved for when I want to transmit it or share it digitally. And that way, it's going to be a lot easier to save or send rather as an email or your blog or a web or whatever. Let me just finish up before I take a few of your questions by going back to that PowerPoint and talking about adding that QR code. So there's basically just a few steps to that. You have your recorded video or audio. You're going to upload, in this case, it was a video, to YouTube and copy the URL code. And then when you go to the QR code generator, which you can find on the web, Canva, somebody mentioned earlier, it was a really good one. You just incorporate what you want that video to be in that QR code generator, and it produces obviously what looks like the QR code, which you just copy like as if it's a JPEG. And then just like we put the photos into our scrapbook page, you would put that JPEG of the QR code into your scrapbook page. And then anyone who has the phone QR browser can actually connect from your scrapbook page to the YouTube and watch that video. So I think that's kind of an interesting tool, especially for family genealogy, where you might have an interview that you might have done with someone that you want to incorporate in that page. Saving and sharing, we mentioned all three of those are really important. The PSD, so you can alter it later, the JPEG, so you can print it or create your album. And when I create the albums, I use, if I'm printing just the page, I use persnickety. You can use whoever you want, but I find they do a nice job. And I also, when I'm doing the album, I do them through Pickaboo, because it's very easy to just take that whole page I just created and put it right into their album page. And then we mentioned also about sharing to the web. Don't forget, there's that 30% off discount that's good till the end of the month on any templates that you might want to purchase. And I did mention that I have two books. One's creating a digital genealogy scrapbook, and the other one is called Your Families, Your Photos, and Your Stories. And they're available at lulu.com and at amazon.com if you're interested in more information. So thank you very much for joining me today. And I hope that you will take the effort to go ahead and take all of the wonderful things you found out about your families and add them to a genealogy scrapbook that many will enjoy in the future. Thanks again.
Awesome, Barb. Thank you so much for going through this with us. There are a couple of questions here. One of them was about, well, people want to have the slides that you just shared. Would that be okay for you to share this so that we can put it on your session page so everybody can download? Yes,
I believe that I sent them to Roots Tech earlier. If they're not there, it's certainly fine to share them. I also had a syllabus that gave a lot of links to, and that should be out there too.
That's
so
fair,
anyway, I can help.
Amazing. Jody, you were asking if there are books using Photoshop. I'm not sure what you want to learn with that question.
On how to use Photoshop, there's a great book called Mastering Adobe Photoshop Elements. It goes through all of the tools and everything that you could possibly do with Photoshop Elements. I think you can also go, once you start your trial with Photoshop Elements, I think they have videos on their site that go through certain things to help you with various tools. And there's also a number of digital scrapbookers out there that if you just Google digital scrapbooking, they have a lot of subscription type of accounts to help you master all different kinds of things with digital scrapbooking, which then of course could be applied to creating your digital family scrapbook.
Right, makes sense. Everyone, this is the opportunity to ask any questions. Was there any part of what Barb showed on the tool that you didn't understand well, that you wanted maybe Barb to show quickly again? Anything that wasn't very clear? Someone is asking about the Peekaboo site. They're just asking, what is Peekaboo, I guess?
It's Picaboo.com, Picaboo, and it is a means of actually printing your family scrapbook. So you saw the one that I did early in the presentation where I went page by page. that was actually a book that was printed by Pickaboo. And they do a great job. And occasionally they have some nice discount codes. I usually get my book all prepared the way I'd like it, and then wait to see when they might have a nice discount code. But they produce a fine product, and that's the one I've used. Now, there are a lot of other avenues by which you can print your family album, but that happens to be the one I use.
Very nice. So that's it. That's what Peekaboo is, everyone. Someone is asking on how do you usually put this together into a book by having different pages?
You'll see if you go to one of those sites, and again, I'd mentioned Pickaboo, where they have what would you like your album cover to look like? And I just take the template page that I produced for the album cover, which would be a 12 by 12, and slip that into the slot that they have. I mean, they've really basically made it pretty easy for you to just go page by page and take whatever you've prepared using your template, and just they'll show you, okay, page 2 and 3, what do you want to put here? And basically you just upload it from your computer where you saved that JPEG and put it right in, and they print the book from there. So it's a pretty simple process once you've got your pages produced and saved as your JPEG, and then you're basically just moving those JPEGs to their prepared page, and they take it from there.
Awesome. Kitty is asking about if there is a comparable site to create a digital book and not printed. So a site that does probably what Photoshop Elements does. Which one would you recommend?
As I mentioned earlier, if you're really trying to do just something really simple with a photo album and you don't necessarily want to add your own backgrounds or things of that nature, there are the album producers that are available through snapfish.com and shutterfly.com. The reason I've gone with Photoshop Elements is only because it does give you that flexibility to bring in items and put them as your background, and to alter things the way you saw me do it today, that you don't have that kind of flexibility with some of the other sites.
Makes sense. Yeah, someone is asking about whether you can include family recipes. I guess if things are in a digital format, you can do everything. You can put whatever you want on Elements as long as it's a JPEG or an image file, right?
Yes, and if you had a family recipe that was still on the card that, say, your grandmother wrote out, you might want to either scan it or take a photo of it and then incorporate it as if it were a photo into your scrapbook page. I think that's an excellent idea.
Yeah, so you can be really creative with this, and many people here are saying that you've sparked a lot of opportunities here for them and a lot of ideas in their minds on how they can apply these techniques.
Makes me tremendously happy. I always think the saddest thing in the world is when we put all our energies into finding out all these things about our family history, and that if we keep them in a file or a binder or a folder or whatever, that people may never ever look at them again, and so much will be lost. So this is one way to make it kind of exciting and interesting. And they always say a picture tells 1,000 words, but we have to add the stories in here as well, and that's what really makes it something special. And I'm really pleased to hear that people are already thinking about what they want to do.
For sure. And someone here was saying that they always wanted to do something like this, and you made it look like they can actually do it. So that's a great compliment. I'll share with you the transcript from the chat so that you can then go through all the comments as well.
Okay,
Great that people said about your presentation.
Great. Well, thank you.
I don't know. This is it, everyone. If you still have any questions that you want to answered that you wanted Barb to answer, you can also raise your hand if you'd like to ask the question instead of typing it. We have still a couple of minutes left on our slot here if you would like to use this time, but overall, I myself felt like the explanation was very clear. You went at a good pace as well, which allowed us to follow along really well. This presentation is also going to be available on rootstech.org for a really long time. So you can always go back to this and go through it with Barb again whenever you have a moment and whenever you're ready to try these techniques out as well. I think someone was saying that the books are not coming up on Amazon. They're also available on the speakers Rootstack Speaker Bookstore on the Expo Hall. So if you go to the Expo Hall tab, the book links are on there as well. I don't know if you have anywhere else that you would like to point people to, Barb, to get your books.
I'm surprised they're not coming up on Amazon. If you go to authors and go to Barb Growth, they should have come up that way. They have both been up there actually for years, so they should be available. The first one, as I mentioned, creating your family's creating a digital genealogy scrapbook, and the other one was your family, your photos, your stories. But you're right, they are in the Roots Tech store for the sessions, and they're also available on lulu.com.
Okay. I'll get those links on the page as well after the session. I'll grab them and I'll post them on the description of this session. So when you come back later,
thank you.
You can find it
there.
I
was just going to mention they can be of additional help because sometimes it helps to have the book right next to you while you're trying to work on it. So,
right. Great, everyone. So let's see. Someone is asking about the cost of the album, but I guess this will depend on what, if you're printing it on what, company you're using, the prices are going to vary.
Yes, I find that most of them start out with 20 pages. So if your album's going to be bigger than 20 pages, it's going to be more costly. There are a lot of different sites out there, so you can check pricing. I want to say that I printed mine for about $60.
Okay.
Again, I mentioned that Pickaboo runs coupons every now and then, which can help in terms of the costs of printing your album. And the other thing you can keep in mind is you could go to a scrapbook store and buy just the album that has the slots where you can have the pages printed separately, each 12 by 12 photo of a page, and just slip them in to the slots in the photo album. And I've done it that way as well.
Yeah, you could also punch holes and have some different type of binding, right, on those. That would be a good.
Yes, you can have a hardcover. I have to say that when I do mine, I do the lay flat version. So part of what you've created on your page isn't going to be in the crease in the center. That costs a little bit more, but you've put a lot of work into the album by that point. It's nice to have it lay flat so you can see the page across both right and left-hand side.
Right, makes sense. So one good question that someone asked was, as you were learning and as you're teaching this order, like the biggest challenges that people face when they're trying to do this? What are some of the challenges that you encountered that you had to overcome, and how did you overcome them?
I think that's a really good question. I'd say, as you saw me even in the demonstration, I still have some issues as I go about it, but that undo button is a really great tool that, you can just fool around with it and they're not going to hurt. You can just keep going. Make sure you save as you go along. Some of the things I found were helpful when I first started doing it. I didn't have the templates, and you notice how much I rave about those because they can make the work so much easier for you to put things where you want them and not have to be an artist to do it. And I'd also add that there's a lot of helpful things out there on the internet as far as videos on how do I do this, or teachers that are more than willing to give you some assist along the way with specific parts of what you're trying to do.
Yeah, I guess this layering system is something that you need to get used to it. And when you get used to it and you understand the different layers and how they interact with each other, you start building a lot of really, really cool stuff with the tool.
Yes, you saw how I had to move the pages up and down over in that layer panel so things weren't on top of one another. That's something you just get a feel for as you go. But, I would say just experiment a little bit. Once you get that free trial from Photoshop Elements and you've got your photos, and just kind of fool around with it a little bit before you get started on trying to make it perfect. And you'll become more of an expert as you go along without even realizing it.
Great. It doesn't seem like we have a lot more questions here to answer. Okay, so someone just asked about the Yin's templates. Which ones of them do you use the most?
I've really come to like the ones where she's got them already set up as an album, because then you're going to have page after page after page that are pretty consistent looking. That's not essential, obviously, because the template may seem important to you when you're working on the album, but after the album's finished, people don't even notice really if you've used the same template 2 or 3 pages in your book, because every page changes with just the data and photos that you put into it. So, but I do like her album ones just because it makes it easy to create a whole album.
Okay, so the album one comes with different pages that kind of balance out each other. That's good.
Yes.
That's great. Good, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Again, Barb has got her contact information around Rootstack here. Reach out to her if you have any questions. I'm sure she'd be happy to start you off in this journey. And the books, I'm sure, will be a great asset to you.
Thank you all. I appreciate your coming, and thank you to Rootstack for giving us this forum to learn from one another.
Yeah, I do apologize that earlier there were some challenges that made it hard for the presentation to take place, but we found a spot here, and we got a lot of people, and we got around 200 people at the top of the session. So this is very good. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Rootstack is almost over as a live event, but these classes are going to be available for a really long time. Sessions that have been added this year, they will stay on for about 3 years. So you have time to go back and keep living this great environment that we've had for the last couple of days. Barb, this was amazing. Thank you so much for preparing this so well, for preparing all the files in a folder so that you could show us through this process. This was great, and you did really well. For everyone else, have a great day and a great weekend, and we'll see you around Rootstack.